Welcome, everyone. This is Joe Dagger, the host of the Business 901 podcast. With me today is Sam Weinman. Sam is the digital editor of GolfDigest.com, where during his tenure, the website has grown to boast the largest digital audience in golf and has been nominated for several national magazine awards. His new book is Win at Losing: How Our Biggest Setbacks Can Lead to Our Greatest Gains. Welcome to the podcast, Sam, and tell me a little bit about yourself, kind of that self-elevator speech, okay?
Joe, thank you. Yes, happy to be here. Yes, so my background is mostly in sports journalism. I've been at Golf Digest now for about 7 or 8 years. Prior to that, I was in newspapers. I covered hockey and golf primarily for a Gannett newspaper chain. So my interest in this topic in particular, I'm also a father. I coach my kids in sports. I'm an athlete myself. And I had sort of came upon this topic of writing about how people deal with losing really from a personal angle, which was dealing with my boys and how they process loss in various youth sports and a little bit of school and even some sort of relationship type setbacks as well. It was a topic that I was drawn to just from personal experience. From there came a book. So I was, which I'm obviously very happy with.
Was it driven by your own failures or failures that you noticed?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Kind of the running theme I have when I'm talking to my boys was, as athletes, they struggle with losing in all different ways, and they saw it as a real commentary on themselves. And I sort of looked at myself like, God, I had losses every which way, and I'm okay. It actually ended up being a good thing for me, and whether it was in sports or in school or professional setbacks. So a lot of sort of my rudimentary early understanding of the topic began with the idea that losing has been a pretty beneficial thing for me in my life. And, after kind of having that foundation, I wanted to go and talk to experts and people who had really dealt with it on a high profile level.
Well, in the lean world, that's kind of the world that I live in, the lean and, the Six Sigma side. It's all about experimentations,
Sure.
Agile, right? We're all agile anymore, okay? But iterations. And, of course, you may say failure, right? But you write about it on a much larger plane. How do I transfer something like that to maybe smaller lessons?
Well, I think the principles apply to pretty much everything. I mean, they apply to sports. They apply to how you process, small failures in your business life. It applies a little bit to, or not a little bit, but a lot to interpersonal relationship setbacks and things like that, divorces, and it applies to, I don't get into too much into real serious stuff like life tragedies and whatnot. But I do touch upon the fact that there's a lot of principles there that apply, namely in how we frame things that happen to us. Like when something happens to us, whatever it is, and you're given a negative outcome, you have an opportunity now to interpret that in what I call a constructive way. So if in the business world, for instance, if you have an idea that blows up and it you ended up wasting 3 months on it, well, something good came out of it, and it might take you a week or 2 weeks or a year to realize what it was, but there's something there, whether it was life experience that you realize, okay, I don't want to do that again, or it was, from all these iterations that we went through, we came up with one thing that happened to stick pretty well, and we're going to go with that. So I say it 100 times, it's as universal a topic as you can get in how we handle setbacks, interpret them, and then use them in a constructive way.
But this isn't a checklist type book, and here's the pattern of what you're supposed to do. I mean, it's kind of a storybook of so I can pull some stories, right?
Yeah, it's funny, a little inside baseball here, but with my publisher, that was a little bit of a push and pull, where their recommendation, and they were dead on, in that people want tangible advice. They want things they can pull from, that they can say, you should do X, Y, Z. And my instinct as a writer or a storyteller was to tell stories about people, and from those stories, draw out the parallels to your own life. And I think it really is, and if I do my job successfully, and I hope I hope I did. It is seeing parallels between how Michael Dukakis lost the presidential election to 11-year-old Charlie Weinman and how he lost a tennis match. Like, there are straight parallels there in how they dealt with things and use it and frame it in a positive way.
So name me a few of the people you tell the stories about. You mentioned Dukakis there, okay?
Yeah.
You mentioned Charlie Weinman.
Yeah, that was a big part of it, yeah.
It was a big part of it. But
He's a big marquee name. He was a tough interview to get. Yeah, so again, I admittedly draw a lot on sports because sports is such a thing that identifies with me. But one of the points I make is that this is really just the universal experience of disappointment. So I talked to Greg Norman, who, if you don't know golf, was blew the Masters, had a 6-shot lead in the Masters, and on the final round, and lost it in kind of heartbreaking fashion. So he's a classic example of someone who had to sort of deal with failure in a very public, notable way. Dukakis is a presidential election. I even talked to Susan Lucci, who, I don't know if you know that name, but she was a soap opera star for many years, and all my children. I'm not a soap opera guy myself, but she was well known because she was nominated for an Emmy Award 18 straight years and lost every time. And it was kind of this running theme that every year she was nominated for an Emmy Award, she lost, and she actually ended up winning on the 19th time. But she's a great example of someone who dealt with losing in a very dignified and admirable way and actually drew something positive from it. I talked to Fay Vincent, who, if you remember that name, he was the commissioner of baseball in the early 90s, and he was pushed out by the owners. So here's a guy who ascended to arguably the most important job in sports and was basically shown the door in a very arguably humiliating way, and how he dealt with that and moved on and took lessons from it. And then I talked to internet, more your world, is I talked to CEOs of startups and people who go through the experience of trying to launch a business and seeing it blow up in their face, and how they process that disappointment and then took something away from it that helped either see their next idea or shape them as people and building resilience. So that's definitely a story that I identify with. There's a bunch of stories. Not just one more that I'll mention is I talked to the Columbia University football team in the late 1980s. I grew up in New York, so I remember this. They were awful. They lost 44 straight games. So there are guys on that team who showed up as freshmen, graduated as seniors, and did not win a single football game, and were humiliated in the newspapers and was like a running joke nationally. And all these guys, or a great percentage of them, went on to be very successful in life. None of them went on to be successful in football. They all went on to be, lawyers and Wall Street executives and doctors and whatnot. But all of them, to a man, point to that experience as this really formative experience in shaping them and helping them sort of develop the life skills of resilience and delaying gratification, all those things that I think are a big part of the book.
I think of what you just said there, and the idea that popped out at me is I'm going to get my numbers a little bit off here, and you could probably correct me being a golf guy, okay? Right. But like Nicklaus, won his 21 majors or whatever, right. Okay? But he came in second like 60 times or 80 times or something crazy like that, right?
Yeah, he won 18 majors. He won 20 if you count amateur majors, but 18 professional majors and finished second 19 times.
Oh, 19. And
okay. Yeah, but and that's just major championships. He won, finished second a bunch more in regular PGA Tour events. But you're absolutely right. Like, he's a guy that really will point to his losses as part of what made him a great player. It was how to deal with it and what he took away from it. And so that's one part of it. And also just he was a really graceful loser, and congratulating the person who won and recognizing that guy was better than him that day, which I think is a big part of losing as well. There's just sort of the interpersonal dignity you have to show in when things don't go your way.
Yeah. You mentioned names, and a lot of people identify with maybe an older audience when they see the Dukakis and the Norman in there, okay? But what can a younger audience take from the book?
Oh, I think everything. I mean, if anything, this is not a parenting book or a book for kids per se, but in my mind, dealing with losing, again, just talking about Charlie Weinman for a second, an 11-year-old kid he has 3 hockey games this weekend. He's going to probably lose 2 of those games, and he's going to get knocked around, and he's going to have a test. And I deal with it every day, but how he handles poor grades in school and rejection at a personal level, these are all things that he's going to have to develop strategies, and how he deals with with disappointment, and it's applicable in so many different ways as a kid. And I always say that how you handle, losing in small ways as a kid helps you develop the skills to handle bigger losses later in life. Not getting into college, not getting a job, not getting an account that you want in your career. So I think that it's all there. Like how losing makes us better. We develop insight into our weaknesses when we lose that you might not pick up on when we're successful.
Is that generation different? I mean, you've experienced the older generation, with like we just talked about the Norman, the Dukakis, that age group, and that younger difference. Is there a difference in how they handle failure, you think, or is there?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's funny, Joe. You hear it a lot now, and it's kind of a running theme with that kids in sports now. Everyone gets a trophy, and no one's a loser, and we're trying to sort of shield them from failure, which I'm a big believer that's a real mistake, because when you shield kids from disappointment, now maybe a 4-year-old when it's his first experience with sports doesn't need to process loss, but as they get older, dealing with loss is a huge part of it, and realizing that the kid to my right is a little better than me, and the kid to my left is a little bit better than me. That's a healthy thing, and so. You hear about parents who try to, they call them helicopter parents, where they sort of swoop in and try to solve their kids' problems. Well, that's a problem, and we're all do it as parents. Like we all want to shield our kids from disappointment, but there ends up being some real negative consequences of that, which is they in turn are not developing the skills they need to, handle disappointment on their own.
Well, I think that's interesting because when you say that, because one of the things we did as parents when our kids grew up, we were living in this nice neighborhood, didn't have any sidewalks, okay? It seemed a little older and stuff. Really loved the house, okay? But we felt we were missing something, okay?
Sure.
So we decided to move, and we drove around neighborhoods till we saw bicycles laying out in the front yard.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's how we did. That's how we picked our next house.
I love that. Yeah.
And because we wanted our kids to grow up in this, what I want to say, this unstructured atmosphere where they weren't coached, or there wasn't adult supervision. We wanted them to play baseball in the backyard or soccer in the backyard and deal with things at their own level. Is that a key for success? I mean, do you think that's a good thing?
I do think so. I mean, I think that as a kid, you're playing, wiffle ball or hoops in the street or touch football. There's constantly a winner and a loser. Like kids are, especially my boys, are uber competitive, and there always has to be a winner and a loser. And sometimes they take it to an extreme because they sort of in that process they lose sight of just the joy of playing, which I think is an important thing. But there's a little bit of a pecking order that things sort themselves out a little bit. And in a small way, I feel like those little competitions they have can be profoundly impactful on, how they handle disappointment when they're, now in organized little league and then high school baseball, whatever the thing is, you have some basic coping skills that you develop over time because you have a history of, okay, I've done this before. I've lost and I've gotten up and I've been okay. I mean, again, I talk about myself, like in every realm of sports, just like I play a lot of tennis. I play a lot of golf, and I'm okay, but I'm not great at any of them. But I like it because I put myself out there, I lose, and from that I get the opportunity to correct where my weaknesses are. And I feel like, and these are all unstructured sports. I'm not playing for any money. God help us if we were. I just handle.
Oh, you got to be playing a little skin there in the game, isn't there?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I play for that kind of money. I play for it, but my livelihood doesn't depend on it. But my point is that it's just that's a big part of sort of handling disappointment is even on these little small ways of how we handle competition, even in the backyard.
Well, and I thought of that, before this, is because I always thought one of the defined moments of my one son's career, okay, Peter, was when we were in the backyard and I was at the kitchen window and they were having squirt gun battles with those what was the water blaster things?
Super soak.
The super soakers. Yeah, they were having one, and it came and he cornered the guy at the gate who was the big sports guy, the cool guy and everything that you always have. And the guy said, "Peter, don't you dare pull that trigger." And I looked, and I had the window open. I looked, and I said, "Well, this is going to be a defining moment in this kid's life, I think, here, okay?" Right. And I waited there a second, and all at once I saw the trigger pulled and the squirt gun, and I said, "I'm getting out of here. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but we're going to see how he handles this, okay?"
Sure.
And I don't know if it turned out well or not for him. There wasn't a lot of discussion, but those are the types of things that I think that kids need. They need those unstructured moments, okay, to be able to grow. Is there any truth in that?
Absolutely, completely. And I think it's like, again, that whole idea of helicopter parenting, which is this idea that we're gonna swoop in here and we're gonna avoid this messy situation because we don't want the big guy to get soaked, and we don't want our kid to be in a position where the big guy is mad, and so we're gonna shield everyone from this awkward situation. And in a way, one of my arguments is no, don't shy from these moments, because these messy moments are also very teachable moments. And of course, you want to make sure everyone's safe when you're talking about your kids, and everyone's treating each other with respect, and because I'm a big believer in that as well. But things need to get messy on occasion, because from that come opportunities for just to learn from it.
What's upcoming for you? And tell me where they can find the book, and a little bit if there's a book site or anything. Yeah,
well, the book is called Win It Losing. You can get it on
Can you show it to me?
Oh, yeah, I have it right here.
You got a copy?
Oh, it just conveniently happens to be here.
Okay.
There's the copy. So that's just an early copy of it. But yes, Win It Losing, it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, your local bookstore. Also, SamWeinman.com you can learn all about the book and me as well. I hope it out talking to people about this topic for a while, because I feel like it's, in addition to wanting to sell books, I feel like it's a hugely valuable sort of lesson that people can benefit from, which is that losing has great opportunities in it.
I encourage people to read it, because my first read through it, I sat through it, I said, "Oh, it's a pretty good book." But then it was like, God, what was that story? And I remembered and I went back to it. So that was
great.
That was kind of cool, because I wanted to go back to it a couple times. So a good sign of a book that it just doesn't end up on the shelf and collect dust back there. Okay.
I hope so. That's good. Yeah, I'd like to see people come back to it.
So, okay, Sam, I would like to thank you very much. This podcast will be available in the Business 901 iTunes Store and the Business 901 blog site. So thanks all the listeners for listening. Thank you, Sam.
Take care, Joe. Thank you.